and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The death toll from devastating floods in Texas have climbed to 43, including 15 children, according to state officials. One father described his desperate search for his daughter as Texas requests more federal resources to handle the disaster. Elon Musk says he's created a new US political party, blasting the increasing deficit as his reason for breaking with Trump. He says America needs fresh thinking and promises to shake up the two-party system. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says changes sought by Hamas to the Gaza ceasefire proposal are unacceptable. He says Israel remains committed to its security terms before agreeing to any final deal. Israeli Prime Minister also confirms that Israel is sending a team for fresh negotiations on a Gaza ceasefire deal. The move comes amid intense pressure to end months of deadly fighting and secure hostage releases. The Israeli military says its defense system intercepted a missile fired from Yemen in a suspected Houthi attack. This comes as regional tensions escalate with new threats from the south. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has made his first public appearance since the outbreak of the Israel conflict, state media reports. He used the event to reassert support for Palestinians and warn against Western interference. Britain's Foreign Secretary David Lammy met Syria's al-Shara in Damascus as the UK re-established diplomatic ties. The UK says it will support humanitarian efforts and seek stability amid wider Middle East unrest. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky calls his latest phone call with President Trump his most productive yet. He says the conversation focused on sustaining support and keeping pressure on Moscow. Now, for our top story, we move to the United States, where the death toll from flash floods in central Texas has reached at least 43 people, including 15 of those being children, with dozens more still missing. Officials are continuing their search for victims. Let's take a listen in to what was said.
We continue to have hundreds of first responders on the ground, water, in this search and rescue process. We have a lot of people here. We got a lot of help. We're very fortunate. Here's some new updated numbers for y'all. As of 5:30, we have recovered 43 deceased individuals in Kirk County. Among these who are deceased, we have 28 adults and 15 children. 12 adults pending identification and 5 children are pending identification.
More than 850 people have been rescued, including those who had to cling to trees to survive. The flash floods, triggered by up to 15 inches of rain, devastated areas around Kerr County, located 85 miles northwest of San Antonio. Among the missing are 27 girls from the Camp Mystic summer camp. Amidst the chaos, one father is desperately searching for his daughter. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
We're at Camp Mystic looking for our kids. We've been in Kerrville all night. We got here and started looking, and the game warden showed up. We went as far as we could downstream, but we don't have the equipment for that, so we're letting them do that, and then we're looking for places that they're gonna potentially be alive. There's over 20 of them still out.
Texas officials have confirmed that federal aid will be provided after Governor Greg Abbott requested help from President Donald Trump. Let's take a listen in.
Government needs to be here for the support and extra resources on the ground as well, and that is what we are doing and what President Trump has dedicated to continue to do. I've visited with the president already about this federal disaster declaration that the governor was going to sign here this morning, and he has indicated that he will honor that and that he will accept that. So that response and that relief will be...
Yeah, the entire river is being searched from the northernmost impact all the way as we run down. You have assets in the air that are still doing searches, you have boats that are in the water doing searches, and you have ground crews doing searches. As the water recedes, new areas being uncovered and searched, and you have human and canine that are working those banks and will continue.
As floodwaters begin to recede, the full scope of the damage is still unclear, with roads, bridges and homes swept away in the raging waters. The situation remains critical, and authorities are urging the public to stay vigilant as further rescue operations continue. We're now joined by Spencer Critchley, who is a communication strategist located in California. Thank you very much, Spencer, for joining us on the program. Spencer, weather disasters like these, the United States is no stranger to them, sadly. What does this tragedy reveal about America's disaster preparedness, and how does it compare with how other nations handle sudden climate emergencies like this one going on in Texas right now?
Well, I want to be careful to speak too soon while this tragedy is still unfolding. There's a temptation to pass judgment, especially given the Trump administration's slashing of emergency preparedness budgets, including hundreds of positions from the National Weather Service, among other agencies who would be involved in this, and his recent talk about abolishing the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So as I say, it's tempting to me to link those moves directly to this. I guess another thing that we should mention is the denial of climate change, which is obviously contributing to the severity of storms that hit the United States now year after year after year with what used to be known as storms of the century. But again, as tempting as it is to link all of those things to this particular disaster, I think it's a little too early to know. It looks like the local weather authorities knew that something was coming, and over the course of the night, they increasingly saw that it was going to be severe, and they did issue emergency warnings, but these did come in the middle of the night on a holiday weekend. And so, at least initially, it's understandable how people might have been caught unaware by just the scale of this disaster.
Yes, Spencer, could you give a little insight into how the United States does reel to a disaster like this? You just mentioned that these storms are becoming much more frequent. What are your thoughts, and how will America and that kind of community be reacting to this?
Well, unfortunately, as with so much else, I think that as time goes by, we can probably predict that there will be a political filter through which people will interpret this event, as if the human role in climate change is a matter of what your political allegiance is, which for many people these days, unfortunately, it is. People will make assertions more as statements of their partisan loyalty than as any kind of assertion about what might be factually true. So it seems clear, according to the vast majority of the world's climate scientists, that we can be as sure as it's ever possible to be sure that these kinds of disasters overall, again, whether this one was or not, but this worsening weather picture that we see is a result of climate change, and that level of climate change is caused by human activity. But of course, many people will continue to assert that that's not true, mostly because they don't want to believe it's true, and in many cases simply because President Trump claims it's not true.
Spencer Critchley, thank you very much. You are staying while we discuss more updates from the United States. Now we move on. Elon Musk says he has created a new US political party, calling it the America Party, in a post on his platform X. The move comes a day after he polled his followers on whether a new party should be formed, with a majority saying yes. Musk says his decision to break away from Donald Trump was triggered by the president's latest tax and spending bill, which he claims will bankrupt America. Musk said the reason he turned on Trump was the president's decision to increase the deficit from what he called an already insane $2 trillion under Biden to $2.5 trillion, a move he warned would bankrupt the country. He further added that he would use extremely concentrated force to disrupt the current two-party system. there has been no immediate response from Trump or the White House to this. We're once again joined by Spencer Critchley to discuss this in further. Spencer, how serious is this announcement from Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, the owner of X, SpaceX, Tesla? Could the America Party really disrupt the entrenched two-party system in the United States?
It's hard to take it too seriously, given Elon Musk's demonstration that his understanding of politics is really incredibly shallow and in many ways naive. It's a chronic problem with people who are extremely successful in one domain, that they conclude that they're therefore brilliant in every field of human endeavor, and all they have to do is turn their brilliant minds to a problem and they can solve problems that have stymied lesser minds for many years. And Musk should have learned by now from his experiences in Washington, where he kept running into the reality that he knows almost nothing about politics and nothing about the function of government. And he had one failure after another as he dabbled in it. Simply being rich doesn't mean that he's going to be able to create a new political party from scratch, which is something that's normally done over a very long period of time. And whether, at least in terms of parties that have any lifetime whatsoever, there have been any number of parties that were created and then quickly disappeared, because really you need political support for a political party, and it's not a simple matter to create broad-based political support.
Spencer, just quickly before we finish, what do you think Elon Musk's aims have been, both here and his previous involvement in politics? We obviously know that he himself could not be president of the United States since he was not born in America. We've also seen him lose business interests. We saw his Tesla stock plummet over the past 6 months since his time as head of Doge. What are your thoughts about Elon Musk's aim, his newfound fledge of politics in US politics? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's a combination of pure business self-interest and also genuine, if wacky, ideology. The business self-interest, of course, is that he opposes taxes and regulations that might affect the profitability of his businesses, and he's all in favor of government subsidies, which have so far given enormous support to his businesses. There would be no Tesla without enormous federal government support, and of course we have SpaceX and Starlink and the other examples to point to as well. But then he's also, seems to be sincere in his embrace of this Silicon Valley-based ideology that's sometimes referred to as techno-feudalism. And this is a group of usually very rich technology company founders whose knowledge of politics and history and government seems to be limited to reading science fiction books and one or two fringe publications on politics or history. And they believe that democracy is finished, and the only way forward is, as I say, a kind of techno-feudalism where leaders of huge corporations who have demonstrated their personal brilliance, who happen to look a lot like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and others in that group, would emerge as the leaders of the world, as the heads of these giant corporations.
Yes.
It sounds nutty because it is nutty, but they seem to be serious about it.
Yes, Spencer, you are staying with us for another update. The Trump administration has deported to South Sudan 8 migrants who had been held for more than a month by the US at a military base in Djibouti, according to the Department of Homeland Security. This came after the migrants lost a last-ditch effort to halt their transfer to the politically unstable country. An aircraft carrying the US deportees has arrived in South Sudan, according to 2 officials working at Juba Airport. South Sudan has long been dangerous even for local residents, reportedly. The US State Department advises citizens not to travel there due to violent crime and armed conflict. The United Nations has said the African country's political crisis could reignite a brutal civil war that ended in 2018. The 8 men who, according to their lawyers, are from Cuba, Laos, Mexico, Myanmar, Sudan and Vietnam, had argued their deportations to South Sudan would violate the US Constitution, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. Spencer, how unusual is it for the US to deport migrants in this way? We've obviously seen in the Donald Trump administration the use of CCOT in El Salvador, but especially given the instability and the literal State Department's own travel warnings. What's your analysis of the Trump administration's actions in this case?
Well, it's virtually unprecedented. I mean, we can cite a precedent going back, if I remember right, to 1896, where the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against deporting people to other countries where they might be subject to unusually cruel punishments. But to quote a respected American journalist named Adam Serwer, the cruelty is the point here. That was true in the first Trump administration when they were locking migrant children in cages and separating children as young as infancy from their parents. Some of those children are still lost in the system. And the point was, as they admitted at the time, to frighten off future asylum seekers and other immigrants by the sheer, they wouldn't have put it this way, but this is what it was, the sheer cruelty, the deliberately spectacular cruelty of what they were doing. And that seems to be the same here. And also, frankly, it appeals to the worst in human nature that is present in all human beings, in which people can take a certain amount of pleasure from cruelty. There's a certain amount of sadism, unfortunately, in every human heart, and hopefully, you know, most people manage to overcome it and try to live their lives according to the better parts of their natures. But Donald Trump, like so many other authoritarians, part of the way they shore up their power is by appealing to the worst instincts in their followers and giving them these theatrical displays of cruelty so that those people then can take out their own frustrations in life, their own fears, their own hatreds, and project them onto helpless migrants in many cases. Now, these migrants, I should note, apparently are guilty of very serious crimes. But in the United States, that should make no difference whatsoever. We have a system of justice which is supposed to give people punishments appropriate to their crime. These people, apparently those ones who were guilty of crimes, had either finished or nearly finished their sentences. And in no case is the punishment supposed to be cruel or unusual. This is bedrock constitutional law in the United States and really the foundation of a civilized nation, in my opinion.
Yes, Spencer Critchley, thank you very much for your insight and joining us on the program. It's always a pleasure to have you. We now move over to Europe for our next story, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described his latest phone conversation with US President Donald Trump as the most productive they've had to date. Zelensky expressed gratitude for Trump's commitment to helping Ukraine. Let's take a listen in to what he said.
У розмові з президентом Сполучених Штатів Америки, яка була напередодні. Напевно, це була найкраща розмова за весь цей час, максимально продуктивна. Ми обговорили тематику ППО, і я вдячний за готовність допомагати. Саме Петріоти – ключ до захисту від балістики. Обговорили ще кілька важливих питань, які детально пропрацюють наші команди вже на зустрічах.
The two leaders also discussed several other key matters which will be addressed in the upcoming meetings. Trump acknowledged the need for additional defense systems given the ongoing Russian airstrikes on Ukrainian cities, including a major drone attack on Kiev just hours after the call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump reiterated his frustration with Moscow's lack of progress towards a ceasefire, stressing the importance of continued support for Ukraine. We're joined by Ambassador Suresh Goel, who's a former Indian diplomat. He joins us live from New Delhi. Ambassador Goel, thank you very much for joining us. Given the turbulent relationship of these two leaders, President Donald Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky. What does this phone call and the comments made about it say about the current state of Ukraine-US relations?
I really cannot make it. I really don't know because Trump, I'm using a word which is not very diplomatic, but he's so mercurial and he's so volatile that there is, I have not been able to forecast his diplomatic or strategic behavior from day one to day two. But if I take a long-term view of what is happening in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia, my sense really is that Russia has made very clear that it is not going to end the war till it has achieved its objectives, and the objectives are very clear from the day one of the war. That is Ukraine not becoming part of NATO, certain amount of territory from Ukraine going to Russia. Those are the two main areas, and Russia really wants to control access to Black Sea and prevent Ukraine from becoming part of the European security architecture. That's very, very important. China has said, Wang Yi has said, that they may say whatever it is in public, but they are not going to be able to support Ukraine simply because if Ukraine is resolved, China is afraid that the USA attention then will shift over to China, Taiwan, etc., etc. Therefore, I don't really see any quick end to what is happening in Ukraine till Russia is able to achieve the objective, and that may take another couple of months really. And even after those months, after Russia has achieved the objective and the war has come to an uneasy end, I don't see peace in Europe. That's more important. Yes.
Yes, Ambassador Goel, you are staying with us for our next story. Thank you for your insight. But we move on now. Diplomats from the BRICS group of emerging nations have agreed on a joint statement ahead of the upcoming Leaders Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The statement underscores the group's unity and commitment to addressing global issues despite its expanding membership. Brazilian President Lula da Silva is hosting leaders from Ethiopia, Nigeria and the UAE as part of the summit, which will focus on enhancing Global South cooperation and discussing pressing geopolitical issues. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has arrived in Rio to attend the summit, while Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres are also going to be present, representing their respective nations. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also in Rio for the high-profile event. Notably missing from the summit this year are Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. BRICS nations have voiced serious concerns over the impact of US President Donald Trump's trade tariffs, warning that unilateral measures distort global trade and hinder economic development. The group, which represents half of the world's population, continues to criticize these tariffs, saying they threaten the global economy. Additionally, at the BRICS Business Forum in Rio, Lula called for strengthening multilateral trading system. Let's take a listen in to what the Brazilian president had to say.
Diante do ressurgimento do protecionismo, cabe às nações emergentes defender o regime multilateral de comércio e reformar a arquitetura financeira internacional. Energia limpa. Ao impulsionar o uso de moedas locais, o NB também tem contribuído para reduzir custos de transação e facilitar operações financeiras. Com o objetivo de simplificar o comércio e os investimentos, os bancos centrais dos BRICS estão trabalhando para desenvolver meios de pagamento transfronteiriços, instantâneos e seguros.
In other news, Vietnam and Brazil are celebrating the first ever exchange of Brazilian beef and Vietnamese tilapia, marking a significant milestone in bilateral trade. The countries have also signed a memorandum of understanding to strengthen cooperation in science, technology, innovation and digital transformation. The BRICS summit in Rio promises to be a pivotal moment for the Global South as nations push for reforms in global governance and more equitable trade practices. We're once again joined by Ambassador Goel. How significant is this BRICS summit for the Global South, especially with these new members of Nigeria, the UAE, also Ethiopia as well, Ambassador Goel? What are your thoughts?
Very significant meeting from the point of view of a Global South. In fact, I think as we progress further in time, I find that the global attention to the problems of the South, so to say, both in terms of financial transfers, in terms of market access, and in terms of development of their own production capacities, has been completely forgotten, really, if I can say in those very stark terms, really. This BRICS summit is important and could have produced a very significant outcome, but for the fact that both Russia and China, Russia more importantly, has decided to stay away from the summit completely, while China has participated at the level of the Prime Minister, Li Keqiang, who obviously will be contributing tremendously to the outcomes. But the way I look at BRICS really is that the problems it faces are insurmountable. One is the global trade regime. Trump tariff threats seem to have completely put a short end to the global trade as we have known before. Number two, Russia, which is actually the pivot to the European energy security metrics. Sanctions against Russia, again, seem to be really, and if Trump really implements a threat of 500% tariff on those trading with Russia, is going to be horrible, really, for most of the countries. And then you have the issues like Iran, the issues in the Middle East. So on the whole, BRICS, which actually, and de-dollarization, China is going to use the platform of BRICS for its own bilateral advantages in terms of the global trade system. So in short, while the BRICS could prove to be very useful, but I think this year has introduced certain variables which make me a bit pessimistic about any significant outcome for this year. Thomas.
Yes, Ambassador Goel, thank you very much for joining us on the programme and for your insight. We now move to the Middle East for our next story, where Israel's Prime Minister's office has confirmed that a negotiating team will head to Qatar today for hostage and ceasefire talks. The statement said that the changes Hamas is seeking to make to the Qatari proposal are not acceptable to Israel. According to a source involved in the mediation, Hamas is seeking three core changes, which are guarantee that talks on a permanent ceasefire will continue until a deal is reached, full resumption of aid through the UN and other agencies, and the withdrawal of Israeli troops to positions held before the March ceasefire collapsed. Despite rejecting those amendments, Netanyahu's office said the team would travel to Doha following an assessment of the situation. This comes as Hamas had earlier said that it had given a positive response to the proposal. The US ceasefire plan is believed to include a 60-day truce, staggered hostage releases, phased Israeli withdrawals, and aid monitored by the UN and the Red Cross. President Donald Trump is due to meet Netanyahu on Monday and has said that there could be a Gaza ceasefire deal as early as next week. We're now joined by Shruti Dasgupta, who's a foreign affairs expert, tuning in live from New Delhi. Shruti, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Israel has said these amendments are, quote, not acceptable. This is the first time in quite a while there was optimism surrounding the region in regards of a ceasefire. How does Israel, do you think, justify refusing guarantees for this permanent ceasefire talks if the stated goal is to end hostilities and bring hostages home?
Greetings, Thomas. Thank you for inviting me to your show. I assume that Israelis feel quite threatened by increased attacks that have been happening on the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and its aid distribution, and it shows that the Hamas is not completely as suppressed as they want to believe. Along with the war, the 12-day war with Iran, they had assumed that Hamas would kind of kneel towards the ceasefire negotiations, and that has not come to fruit. So it seems that Israel is reluctant. Netanyahu is not very much in favor of ceasefire for this very particular reason, that if they bend now and continue with this proxy peace, it will last for a bare few months and resulting in nothing major except diplomatic talks on the table, while Israelis continue to be under attack, not just in Israel but around the world through the proxies and the supporters of Hamas. So I'm not really sure that Israel is seeking peace as of now, or even Hamas is seeking peace. Both of them seem to be wanting to push through their own final word. Hamas wanting Israel out, IDF out of the region of Gaza, and Israel wanting Hamas out of Gaza, or at least any known probable routes of Hamas out of Gaza. So right now it's a pull and push, each wanting their own. The final word will only be said when the peace negotiations actually pull through.
Yes, Shruti, you are staying with us for more updates. We now move on. Thousands rallied on the streets of Tel Aviv, demanding a ceasefire in Gaza and a deal to release the remaining hostages held by Hamas. Protesters carried banners reading "Bring them home now," as they called on the Israeli government to end the conflict. The demonstration came after reports that both Israel and Hamas have reacted positively to the outlines of a US-brokered truce deal. Let's take a listen in to what some of the protesters had to say.
The problem is that the government don't want to do any deal because they can do a deal and to release everybody now. We are protesting here also to end the war and to get back all the hostages, because this war is without any reason, without any logical, it's a political war. The government don't want to stop the war because it keeps them on the Knesset, as the parliament. They know that if they will end the war, probably the people will ask to do election to stop.
We're talking all the time about ceasefire, and Israel is keep dismissing it, and also Hamas. I have hope that it will happen, but you always have this, like, maybe they will throw it away, but I hope they will, like, actually do it. I'm hopeful.
The war began on October the 7th of 2023 when Hamas attacked Israel, killing about 1,200 people and taking 251 hostages, about 50 of which are still held in Gaza. Israel's subsequent military response has killed more than 57,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry. We're once again joined by Shruti Dasgupta to discuss this. Shruti, there's staunch opposition in Israel to Israel's continued war. They believe, a lot of them believe, that Netanyahu and his government, the current government of Israel, hasn't been prioritizing the safety of the hostages in Gaza. What are your thoughts on that point of view? Yes.
Well, I seem to agree with those protesters because this is a political war right now, even after the death. And I'm pretty skeptical on the numbers of 57,000 because the Gaza ministry keeps changing the numbers. They keep updating and downgrading and upgrading and downgrading. So the full count of actual impact of Israel's war, of course, will be horrendous, but not probably as large as Gaza is claiming right now.
Okay, those are the numbers that we have, though, Shruti,
yes,
from the
correct.
numbers, yes.
Correct, but I'm skeptical on those numbers, so I'm not going to comment on how many were killed or not. But we will, I will continue to say that it's a political war. Definitely, it is more of an ideology, and rather than every time Israel asks for a release of the entire hostages, Hamas refuses because that is the only currency they have in their hands. The hostages, the dead bodies of the hostages, are the only currency they have at hand. If they hand that over to Israel, they're pretty scared that they will be obliterated or left without any recourse to sit on the negotiating table. This particular aspect is very painful to the people of Israel who have loved ones sitting in the hands of Hamas, and going through unimaginable torture. So for them, the first priority should not be the conditions of the peace that should come at the cost of their the lives and their health of their loved ones. So they are kind of done with it. It's been a very long 21-month war. It is not viable anymore for either sides to hold it. The cost of life, the cost of infrastructure, resources is too high for it to continue. And Israel is feeling the pinch. They want their people back. And it is completely correct that Netanyahu is holding on to his coalition by a bare thread of power. And if the war comes to an end and there is peace in Israel and the Gaza region, he will have to continue to hold the elections, which were held at abeyance, and he might not come back to power. So it is a very difficult situation for the people who are actually suffering due to the entire hostage situation. And I wish that Israel and the world would ensure that Hamas hands over the bodies and the live ones to hostages to the families that owe it. And it's difficult for anybody to watch their people being held month after month in a situation where nobody knows what's being done to them.
Yes, Shruti, thank you very much. We move on once again. The Israeli military has said that it has intercepted a missile launched from Yemen towards Israel. As per IDF, sirens were activated across several areas in Israel, accordance with protocol. Israel has threatened Yemen's Houthis with naval and air blockade if the Iran-backed group persists with attacks on the country in what it says is solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. Since the start of the war in Gaza in October, the Houthis have been firing at Israel and at shipping in the Red Sea, disrupting global trade. Most of the dozens of missiles and drones that they have launched have been intercepted or fallen short. Israel has also carried out a series of retaliatory strikes. Okay, we're once again joined by Shruti Dasgupta. Shruti, what kind of danger do the Houthis still they face to Israel? What is their objectives, and should people in that region be concerned about their actions?
Well, Houthis are a proxy a non-state actor, a proxy actor for Iran itself, and so is Hamas and so is Hezbollah. And they have been trying to draw Israeli fire and ammunition away from Hamas so that Hamas continues to act as a nuisance to Israel. And the ultimate goal of all four, Iran and its four non-state actors, is to throw the Israelis out of the Arab world. So this is an existential crisis that has been existing in that particular zone for more than 4 decades. The war with Iran the 12-day war with Iran has weakened all of these non-state actors, but the attack from Yemen that we just saw or heard about is particularly a kind of pressure tactic that if you do not come to the docking table and end the war and agree to the terms which have been deemed unacceptable by Netanyahu and his administration, if you don't yield on those particular terms, you might face a third war with Yemen. So it's a kind of pressure building tactic that to force Israel to bend the knee while Israel is forcing Hamas to bend the knee at the talking tables. These are political pull and push. The people of the regions, of course, fear any attacks that come through because they've been through 2 wars, one with Iran and one with Hamas, where casualties on both sides have been very, very high. So as a result, they do not want a third front to open, but that's exactly what Yemen is threatening. And if it does come to a head point where Israel declares war with Yemen, then Netanyahu continues to stay in power, the hostage situation stays in abeyance, as well as the Israeli people continue to face bombs coming down at their heads. So it's a difficult, it's an amalgamated situation. It cannot be looked at in isolation. What the Yemen are doing are exactly what the Hamas want them to do, and that is exactly what Iran wants them to do.
Yes, Shruti, you are staying with us once again. We have some more Middle East updates. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has made his first appearance since the outbreak of his country's recent 12-day war with Israel, taking part in a religious ceremony in Tehran, according to state media. The leader was shown in a video broadcast by state television greeting people and being cheered at a mosque as worshippers marked the anniversary of the martyrdom Imam Hussein, an important date for Shia Muslims. Khamenei has not been seen in public since before Israel initiated the conflict with a wave of surprise airstrikes on June the 13th. His last public appearance was 2 days before that, when he met with members of parliament. On June the 26th, shortly after a ceasefire began with Iran and Israel, Khamenei made his first public statement in days, saying in a pre-recorded statement that Tehran had delivered a slap to America's face by striking a US airbase in Qatar and warning against further attacks by the US or Israel on Iran. We're once again joined by Shruti Dasgupta. Shruti, what do you think of the current stability of the regime in Iran? The Iranians have claimed victory in this conflict to their state media. The Israelis were vocal about wanting regime change to actually get rid of the Ayatollah. What are your thoughts on the stability of the current government in Tehran?
Well, the situation before the war was that Ayatollah regime was holding on to power by the barrel of the gun, and there was sufficient dissent against the regime in place. But with the war that happened, in fact, it brought the dissenters back into the fold of the Ayatollah regime, because no matter whether they like what Ayatollah regime does, whether they like the current administration or not, they do not want to be ruled by the Western powers. So it has brought people that were not happy with Khamenei and his rule back into his fold. When the particular appearance that you're talking about, in that particular appearance, people were chanting that we'll spill our blood for our leader. So which shows that solidarity of the people to the cause of Khamenei, that is fight against America. When you kind of present, Israel is an enemy of the Ayatollah regime and has been since 1949, when the first Khomeini went to the Palestinian region and started telling people that they should reject the Jews in that nation. So it's a long drawn ideological conflict between Iran and Israel. Beyond this, what happens is that now with Iran, they've taken on the larger enemy, not Israel. They've taken on the larger enemy. A superpower like USA had just dropped they just dropped B-2 ballistic missiles on 3 sites and they left. They did not want to engage in a full-scale war with Iran. And mere survival is a cause of victory for them, that they made a superpower scared enough not to kind of obliterate them. So when he claims this kind of a victory, the people who were hoping to support him and were not really much in support of the regime, they come back into his fold. So this regime is now stronger, although their inhumane actions continue. You will see news about hangings, public hangings and other punishments coming out from Iran, but the people still stand with them because they do not want a Western power interfering with their own internal matters. And so they have stayed with it. The Ayatollah regime is stronger now, and the change that they had earlier spoken of and then denied, the change of power, is not going to be very easy. Had the war targeted a few political entities, the results would have been a little different.
Yes. Shruti Dasgupta, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Always a pleasure to have you on. We now move on to the world of sport next. Real Madrid edged out Borussia Dortmund 3 in a 2-inning Club World Cup quarter-final to secure a semi-final showdown with Paris Saint-Germain. Playing at MetLife Stadium, Madrid took early control with goals from Gonzalo in the 10th minute and Fran Garcia in the 20th. Gonzalo continued his standout tournament, converting a cross from Arda Güler, while Garcia finished off a move set up by Trent Alexander-Arnold. Jude Bellingham and Vinicius Jr. missed chances to increase the lead, and Tchouaméni hit the bar in the second half. Despite scorching heat and a late flurry from Dortmund, Real held on to the advance. Novak Djokovic powered into the Wimbledon 4th round with a dominant straight set win, with a win over fellow Serbian Komomir Kekmanovic. The 24-time Grand Slam champion just took 1 hour and 47 minutes to secure a 6-3, 6-0, 6-4 victory on centre court, combining aerobatic shot making with clinical precision, chasing a record equaling 8th Wimbledon title and a 25th major overall. Djokovic will next face Australia's Alex de Minaur in the last 16. At 38 years old, Djokovic remains a major contender on grass, even as younger stars like Alcaraz and Sinner emerge as the sport's new leaders. Defending champion Barbora Krejcikova crashed out of Wimbledon after a 6-2, 6-3, 6-4 defeat to American 10th seed Emma Navarro. The Czech player started strongly, taking the first set and leading by a break in the second, but her level dropped sharply as she struggled physically in the final set. Krejcikova, who has been battling an injury season, required medical attention and fought back tearfully to hold serve at 3-5. However, Navarro stayed composed to close out the match, ensuring the women's title will go to a first-time champion for the 8th straight year. She will face 18-year-old Mira Andreeva. Kenya's Chebet has made history by becoming the first woman ever to run 500,000 meters in under 14 minutes. The 25-year-old Olympic champion won the race in Oregon with a time of 13 minutes and 59.97 seconds, breaking the previous world record set by Ethiopia's Gudaf Ksage. Chebet had already set a world record in the 10,000 meters earlier this year and said she was inspired to try for another record after her strong race in Rome last month. Kenya's Agnes Chebet came second with the third fastest time in history, while Tsegay finished third. Well, that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you very much.